What are you? I've been asked this question ever since I was a little kid. None of my facial features seem to align with just one ethnicity. People would tell me all the time, you look white, you look Asian, you look Mexican, and it would have me feeling upset because I could sense the underlying judgment. People have failed countless times to try and label me, which has led me to feel misunderstood and invisible in many parts of my life. Before I answer the question, let me inform you a little bit about my experience with self-identity. I grew up in a neighborhood called the Lower East Side, located in Manhattan, New York. This neighborhood was mostly made up of Hispanic and Latino people, ranging from Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Mexicans. During this time period, I had a lot of friends, and I felt like most people at my school knew who I was. The irony lies in the fact that, although a lot of people knew my face, not a lot of people knew my personal life. As a kid, I kept a lot of my background to myself because I didn't feel like there was anything significant to share with others. I wasn't someone who had a big extended family that lived close to home. I had no real strong family connection that usually enables people to have a closer connection with their culture and a better understanding of who they are as a person. I only ever shared my background when it was assigned as schoolwork. I came to believe that people viewed me as an enigmatic figure. I lacked pride in who I was, and I didn't realize that that would be an issue until later on in life. In grade school, I hardly ever put any effort into really knowing who I was as a person. My interests were that of a child because I was a child. I spent so much time begging my mom for new Game Boy games, tech decks, and wrestling toys. All I ever wanted was to just be a happy kid and have fun. There wasn't much I could do as a child to learn more about myself. Sure, there was the internet, and there were books that I probably could have checked out at the library. Growing up as a kid, that just wasn't on my mind, and to do that all by myself would have been really hard. I probably would have needed some guidance, some really big help on tackling something like that, and I couldn't really get that from my family. I probably could have gotten it from a teacher, but again, I was a kid, I didn't really know any better. That just wasn't on my radar of really diving deep into me as a person and my roots. Though as time went on and I advanced in grade level, I soon began to see the obvious differences between my classmates and I. Other students had last names like Garcia, Martinez, Castillo, Rodriguez, and then there was me, who had such a peculiar last name, so many people failed to pronounce it the first time. I remember being in kindergarten and panicking because I just couldn't spell my own last name. And yeah, it's a given, maybe because I was little and I don't know how to do all that stuff yet. But for the most part, a lot of kids around that age do know how to spell their name and they know their name well. And just for me, it was just a moment where I was just like, man, my last name is really difficult. With 10 letters long and no way for the turkey syllable to even help me out this time, I dreaded spelling my last name, Valdivieso. Unfortunately, I was never really able to show more about myself to the people at my school. My mother had us move away from the Lower East Side for personal reasons. I was forced to leave everything behind, and I wasn't even able to say goodbye to the friends I made at the school. For the longest time, I felt really guilty for not being able to give an explanation to the people that I made friends with. And it's so crazy to think that I was in the presence of my friends' lives, and in a blink of an eye, I vanished. I had no control over this, which made me feel really sad, but I couldn't do anything about it, so eventually I had to move on. I'm pretty sure that almost everyone at the school forgot about who I was, which is understandable. The schools that I ended up attending later on were also made up of a lot of Hispanic and Latino students. This made it so much easier to get along with new classmates, since so many of the students shared similar upbringings. We had parents that introduced us to shows like Caso Cerrado, Sábado Gigante, and even Walter Mercado, and music from artists like Romeo Santos, Juan Gabriel, and Jose Luis Perales. Among some of the differences that I began to notice between my peers and I was the way we all individually spoke Spanish. Students at the schools that I've attended knew so many different slang words tied to their culture. For instance, Puerto Rican students knew words like bendito, and Dominican students knew words like diache. I grew up hearing these words all the time, and I loved learning new ones. I didn't know any slang words of my own. I never got to learn any of that. I just spoke Spanish plainly. And I didn't even have a distinct accent when I spoke Spanish. Plus side, I did receive a lot of compliments on the way that I spoke Spanish. I got comments that said I spoke Spanish clearly and smart. Although I knew there was no better way of speaking Spanish, hearing those kind of compliments did make me feel prideful of my identity. The way I spoke Spanish wasn't directly tied to my ethnic background, but it had everything to do with who I was as a person and how I went about speaking to people. I felt like a part of me was finally being recognized. Aside from my ability to speak Spanish fluently, I still wanted something, the ideal family. Everyone I knew seemed to have both parents in their household, seemed to have siblings that they cared for, grandparents that loved them, aunts and uncles that look forward to seeing them, and countless cousins that they would call their best friend. I wished I had that. And I honestly believe that if I did have that ideal family, that I would have been able to have that opportunity to really get to know my roots, which in turn would have allowed me to better know who I was as a person. Jumping a couple years from elementary to middle school, I experienced a lot of bullying. People were more critical towards me due to my appearance. Many people made presumptions on top of that. Because of this, I hardly ever spoke about myself to others and really let people in because I was afraid that people would judge me and make fun of me. To avoid scrutiny, I would keep everything to myself and just avoid everything that had to do with my past. Even if I was asked personal questions directly, I would try my best to be as vague as possible or even avoid the question altogether. Ultimately, I convinced myself that the less I interacted with people, the more I kept to myself, the less people that knew me, the less of a chance I had at being a target for negativity. Despite my efforts, problems still seeped their way to me. There would be instances where people would negatively comment on my eyebrows, my mouth, my complexion, my hair, just everything. There just always seemed to be something that people disliked about me and would have to point out and just say to me. It almost seemed like I could never find my own social group. The interesting part about all of this is that the ones who were judging me usually were people within my own demographic, usually guys who were also Hispanic and Latino, and they would constantly judge me on how different I was in comparison to them. I've grown up eating habichuelas con dulce. I've listened to Rosas by La Oreja de Van Gogh. I've spoken Spanish in my own household for many years, and I've had a mother who has superstitions like, don't go outside with your hair wet or else you'll get a cold. Despite all of these commonalities, I was still treated differently because I was considered white passing. To me, it didn't even feel like people saw me as Hispanic or Latino. It felt like they just ignored that altogether. My whole existence, neatly and ignorantly packed into the label of white kid. I don't hold a grudge against any of the people who have judged me in the past. Sure, I wish things were different, but I truly think that everything up until this point in my life has shaped me to be the person I am today. My answer to the question, what are you, is as follows. For a long time, I thought my ethnicity is what shapes me to be the person that I am. It took me a long time to realize that that's not the case. To me, my identity is also about my beliefs and values I use to carve my own path in life. Right now, I'm focused on discovering and growing different aspects of my life to really figure out who I am. And I'm gonna do that through these videos. Hopefully one day I will be able to give a proper answer to that question. But for now, I'm just going to focus on my own journey. Thank you for watching.